Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about life in a city beneath the ocean. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it carry you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. You wake to a ceiling that holds the sea the way a cupped hand holds light. The pane above you is thick as a book and warm along its edges where a hair-thin heating trace keeps the salt from blooming. Beyond the glass, the water is not blue so much as layered. Slate at the top, bottle green in the middle, a velvet dark beneath that makes the bright things brighter. White bellies of fish tilting like pocket mirrors, a ribbon of anchovies that turns at once as if a single muscle ran through all of them. A slow backwash presses a faint palm against the pane and lets go. The city does not flinch. Air has a taste here. Iodine, metal rubbed clean, the green of dried kelp hung too long in a warm room. It is not a scent you would call sweet, but your lungs understand it. It arrives disciplined, measured, tempered to the room. In the wall, a pump signs its name every few seconds, 4 beats and a breath, and a valve answers with a small, proud click. Under the bunk, a braided rope holds a coil precisely as wide as your hand, because everything that can be grabbed is shaped for a hand to trust. Light comes up from the floor before it comes down from the ceiling. A ribbon along the baseboard brightens from sleep to morning in the color of shells wet with tide, and the ceiling, its glass webbed with copper lines, receives the signal and deepens. Shadows are wide here, soft at the edges. Nothing in the city throws a hard line unless it is meant to warn. A strip above the doorway shows the tide schedule and the hour the pumps prefer. The numbers are small, the confidence large. Someone has stuck a pressed sprig of sea grape under the strip with a bit of wax. It will leave a stain that no one will mind. The sleeping platform is a frame of anodized aluminum and a woven mat of something that began its life as a plant, with a name you can't pronounce. When you sit up, the mat remembers both the last sleeper and the climate and releases neither all at once. A low cupboard holds 3 bowls with weighted bottoms and a cup whose lid screws down the way a jar lid does, because slosh makes more work and work is already spoken for. In a pocket by the door, a small bag of desiccant beads has turned cloudy overnight. You pinch and replace it from a jar that is always fuller than you expect, and never full enough to be forgotten. The corridor beyond your door is rounded like the inside of a pipe laid on its side. The floor plates have a pattern raised into them that gives water somewhere to decide to go if water ever forgets its place. At the junction, a wheel large as a dinner plate sits flush with the wall. It is oiled and warm, and a little notch of red tells you it has been turned recently and will be turned again, whether or not it needs it, because practice is what makes luck here. A child pads past with a net bag of sponge toys, eyelids heavy with sleep and salt. She touches the wheel with 2 fingers and keeps walking, as if greeting an aunt. Panels over your head show the city's skin the way a patient watches a wound. Hairline maps of each sector, a scatter of green points for seals that are content, 2 amber ones blinking at the far edge where the reef is being difficult this week. The amber is not a story today. It is an appointment on someone's list. A speaker near the map sighs once with the voice of deep water finding a new tone 2 kilometers out, and then resumes its careful hush. You move toward the concourse, and the city makes room for you the way a school of fish opens and smooths around a rock. People pass in clothes that keep heat near skin and shed it when they're busy, knit from fibers that began as algae and ended as something like wool. Ankles flash bands of copper the width of a thumbnail. They are not jewelry. The bands control warmth and warn of foolishness, and the last time a band turned black at the edge, someone told the story 3 nights running, so no one would pretend not to remember. No one walks fast. It isn't laziness, it is arithmetic. The water beyond the glass pushes in every direction at once, and the city answers that insistence by refusing to insist on anything itself. A woman near the transit hatch checks a seam with the back of her knuckles, feels for the shiver that is wrong rather than the hum that is right, and moves on. An elder sits on a low stool with a tin of grease and a brush, and leans his nose to a hinge. He can smell when it wants attention, the way you can smell rain on a hot road. He lifts the brush and gives the hinge what it asks for. The hinge says thank you in the least dramatic sound possible. Above the concourse, a long window gives you the open water. Outside, a forest of cables disappears into the soft dark, each one vibrating at a note you cannot hear unless you bite your teeth together and listen through your bones. The cables lead to farms you can't see from here, to looping trellises where seaweeds write their green alphabets, to cages where fish purl and turn in patient circles, to bladders that hold air like a secret and let it out on command. A ray, a sheet of night with edges, floats past the window's lip and flicks one fin so lazily you understand why people here rarely wave. Morning speaks in tools. A cart the size of a bathtub glides past on ball feet, its tray a quiet landscape of gaskets, clamps, adhesive in tubes the color of cream. The mechanic pushing the cart wears a belt with lanyards that clip to anything that could develop the ambition to roll. His hands are clean, but the lines in his palms are dark where they hold the memory of sealant. He hums an old song and taps the cart twice when he turns a corner, not because the cart can hear, but because corners like to be warned. A lamp beside a door goes from blue to white, and a hatch will open for the breakfast shift in 5 breaths. You glimpse the edges of that room, steam kept to its lane by baffles that know their business, racks with trays whose bottoms are heavy so that elbows can be easy, a knife with holes cut into the blade so the sea lettuce doesn't cling with hurt feelings. A hand scrapes a board, a pot lid trembles and then remembers itself. Someone says, "Watch the vent," and someone else answers, "Watching." The words are not scolding. They are the way the city arranges its next hour. On the wall just before the entry to the viewing hall, a board holds paper thin as onion skin sealed under film. The ink is crisp, the corners rounded. A list of today's swim windows on the exterior rigging. A diagram of the west dome with arrows drawn in grease pencil where currents bullied the panels last night. A note about a memorial for a fish that fed the city longer than anyone expected, and was never given a name because to name a thing is to forget to thank it when it becomes food. At the bottom, a child's drawing of a whale shares space with a stamp that says water quiet, pressure polite. You stand at the viewing rail and the world beyond performs its slow work with no awareness of you. Spine silt lifts and settles. A school splits to pour around an invisible obstacle. A rope blooms a white fuzz of new life that someone will brush away before it thickens. A sound reaches you through the pain and the supports. A far round note that is not music and that no one here calls song, because giving it a beautiful name would make you think it was for you. People tip their heads without moving their feet and then go on. You think of roofs that do not have current stroking them. You think of air that does not need to be counted. You think of windows that open because you ask nicely. The city thinks of intake filters and calcium buildup in pipes and the good hours for letting children push their faces to the glass without making the anti-fog work too hard. You call the pump's voice a noise. The people do not call it anything. The pumps have always had voices. There is a doorway with a strip of coral tied above it because someone's grandmother insisted years ago that coral remembers storms and would lend that memory to a hinge. There is a handprint on the bulkhead at child height made in paint mixed with crushed shell. The print is smaller now than the hand that made it. The owner passes it and does not look down. He touches his belt, where the lanyard clips, and checks the strap, with the same 2 fingers he touched the wheel with when he was small. It is the same gesture. It will always be the same gesture. In the quiet between 2 breaths, the pressure monitor chirps once the way a gentleman clears his throat. No one startles. A gauge needle leans a hair to the good. Somewhere above, a shutter the size of a bedsheet decides to sit a little flatter against its frame, and the little motor that has appointed itself responsible for that action gets to be proud for a second, and then forgets pride like a decent motor should. You rest your palm on the thick rib that frames the viewing pane, and feel the city's pulse travel through the bone of your hand into the bone of your arm and up into the place in your chest that still believes thunder is a warning. A woman next to you rests her palm on the same rib and closes her eyes, not to pray but to listen for anything that is not ordinary. She smiles and leaves her hand there a beat longer than you do. Her skin and the rib agree on what morning sounds like. This is the truth the water tells without raising its voice. You would not last a day in a city under the sea because your attention is not trained for a world that never stops pressing. Here, calm is engineered, and beauty is a side effect of maintenance. People greet hinges. They read pumps. They tie charms to door frames, not because magic is real, but because memory is. They move at the speed of a sealant bead laid neat and true. The pane above your bed does not keep the ocean out. It keeps your heart from forgetting which rhythm to borrow. Behind you, a chime shaped like a glass drop announces the hour when the kitchens will spare steam for tea, when the children will be allowed to cluster in the viewing hall for 6 minutes before their lessons, when the elder with the grease will teach a new pair of hands how to hear a hinge change its mind. Ahead of you, a fish writes a slow cursive down the edge of the window and erases it with the same tail. The city draws a breath that has been measured twice. You learn which sounds to count and which to ignore. The day begins without drama and entirely on purpose. Morning in this city does not wake with sunlight, but with routine. First, the membranes stir, the filters whisper, then the heat exchanger stretches its breath, and only after that do the lamps permit themselves to grow warmer. Humidity in each module nudges just over a fine mark, then settles back, as if someone gave the air a gentle push and caught it again by the elbow. On the ceilings, faint dew lines shine. They are not wiped with towels, but gathered with soft scrapers like little blades for ice. Every drop has its place, running into narrow channels, dripping into calibrated flasks marked in thick pen. Tea, irrigation, washing hands. In the living cells, people do not clatter after sleep, they rustle. Fabric screens retract with magnetic clicks, mats creak like well-stretched nets. From cupboards come small jars of sea salt. Not for food, a pinch is thrown into miniature vaporizers so cloth dries faster and doesn't cling with damp. On the same shelf lie toothsticks made of kelp fibers. They are not chewed but used to scrape patiently, without foam or fuss. Rinse water is rationed, 2 capfuls from a marked flask for the mouth, no more. The rest belongs to the house. In the kitchen, the morning watch does not rush, it counts. Pans never bring liquid to a rolling boil, only to a faint shiver around the rim. That saves fuel and keeps flavor from turning bitter. In a wide, shallow pot, fish broth steams. It does not smell fishy, it smells of warmth. Strips of seaweed and thin slices of root grown on hanging trellises go in. The root gives sweetness, like a carrot on land, but with a cool, saline aftertaste. On flat plates, bread made of algae flour bakes, dense, crumbless, heavy, but cut clean when the knife is drawn steadily back, like hauling in a net. Tables are metal, their rims softened, bowls have magnetic bases, set them down and they stay, refusing to slide. Spoons are perforated with small ovals, so soup sheds its extra wave before it reaches the lips. Portions are not given by voice or favor, but by ankle bracelets. Each person's morning workload is coded there, and so is their share. Children get half servings more often than full ones. Their rhythm matters more than quantity. Spoon, pause, spoon. Tea brews from dried fronds of fucus and little coastal herbs. It is greenish and tastes of iodine and the warm metal of the cup. At the tables, voices stay low and speak not of the sea. They ask who holds the warm channel this morning, the hours when the vents spill extra hot air for drying clothes. They bargain over who will take a few extra stones of heat for the elders, small thermal pebbles wrapped in cloth, reheated each night and tucked against knees. By the window, behind a heavy curtain, a little bowl holds smooth glass beads. Before eating, each person drops one inside. It is not a request. It is gratitude that pumps did not change their mind in the night. Dishes do not go to a sink, they go around the circle. First, wooden scrapers clear leftovers into a bucket for fish feed. Then racks spray twice with brine, once with fresh water measured exactly. Drops that cling are blown away with warm air from corrugated hoses, so bowls do not crust with salt and do not wring cold in the hand. The great pot of broth becomes endless. New water and fish are added right away for lunch. While the base stays hot, flavor holds steady. Clothing is not put on, it is assembled. A thin underhood, soft as a mollusk's skin, warm at the nape, cool at the brow. an underlayer with seams turned outward, not for style but so they do not chafe. Over it, a dense jacket with pockets for heat pads. The pads clip in and can be released with one hand inside thick gloves. Cuffs and collars are sealed with clear tape that gleams unevenly but keeps warmth like the tide keeps the shore. By the door stands a shelf of sealed packets, microfabric patches with a clip-on inspection light. They are taken not because anyone expects to go outside, but because comfort comes from readiness. Beside them lie soot sticks for marking when adhesive strips lose their bite. A pocket holds whistles, not for water, for corridors. The sharp sound cuts through the pump's voices. School children gather in their learning hall. One of them drags a knuckle along the wall, counting steps to the emergency hatch. It is custom. Each morning a dry drill without notes or laughter. The teacher rings a little bell made from a fish vertebra. The sound is soft, harmless to the glass. On the wall, a schematic of the sector, plain, not pretty. Today's lesson is not numbers or letters, but why you never touch a chilled pipe barehanded, and how to walk without blocking a vent when you're small. On each desk, tablets with roughened surfaces so fingers don't slip, and stubby pencils tucked into cloth loops. They do not write words, they draw quiet roots, arrows for hugging the shadow of walls, arrows for crossing the center. Meanwhile, elders check the warm windows, vent grills with mica shutters. The holes are not even, each one has a task. They do not polish them bright. Too much shine spoils the airflow. They brush away dust with soft bristles, then lean close, listening skin first. If the draft hisses, a nail nudges a flap until the sound returns to steady breath. For this, elders eat out of turn and choose their heat stone first at night. There are also 5-minute hands. In a long corridor, yellow lamps switch on overhead, and everyone free goes to stroke the seams. Not poetry, real work, palms run along panel joins. Flesh feels before eyes when a bolt has grown proud by even a quarter turn. Behind them walks someone with a tiny wrench, tightening silently. This is how the city keeps its peace. In the refectory, after the first wave has gone to duties, collapsible drying racks unfold across the floor, white ribs like patient branches. On them hang gloves, underhoods, short towels. Above, the warm channel opens on schedule. A band of air drops from the ceiling, ruffles cloth edges, moves on. Within a minute, it will pass through the whole row, favoring no one. A girl stands watch with a sand timer, waiting exactly the allotted share for each batch. She is grave as a lighthouse keeper. There is a quiet accounting too. At the dispenser, each person touches their ankle to a low console, collects credits of heat, small tokens dimpled for the thumb. These are stacked into slots above the communal stoves. Morning for tea, noon for lunch, evening for elders. If someone has endured a night without a warmer and does not complain, their token slides to those who suffered damp. It is not charity, it is arithmetic. Each home carries its own morning duty. In one, they return yesterday's mesh bags of dry bread crusts. They'll be ground for fish feed. In another, bundles of sea thread are given out, mint-colored for children, dark for those who work at the glass. In a third, Small filters for personal breathing collars are swapped, little hooded tubes meant for brief lapses in air quality. They are not stylish, kept like a handkerchief just in case. Before scattering to tasks, most stop at the low garden, a long trough along the wall where not food but patience grows. Miniature coastal shrubs, moss spread on mesh, a few colonies of faintly glowing algae for the children. No soil here, only fiber and drops. If someone flips the tag on a new sprout, live to a third morning. Someone else exhales softly over the moss. It changes nothing, but the habit warms. The schedule clicks shut like a clasp. Those bound for farms check the seam tape on their cuffs, making sure it hasn't gone brittle. Those bound for kitchens drop another heat token in a palm. Those heading to school pull their caps snug and slip a shred of dried herb into their pocket, chewed at recess instead of sweets to keep the mouth busy and the noise softer. All of it happens without haste, yet without idle pauses. No heroes, no speeches. Water presses steady on the walls. The city answers with morning routine, and on that routine it floats. You would call it ordinary life, but here ordinariness is a craft. Tea is ladled by measured scoops, air is rationed by minutes, warmth by tokens, attention by habit. When the schoolroom door closes with its quiet seal and the corridor holds only the steps of those walking toward pumps, vents, cauldrons, and trays, morning is considered accomplished. What comes next is work, a new chapter, new sounds. For now there are clean bowls, taut seams, and a calm number on the little gauge by the exit. This is what good morning looks like here. Work here begins not with a whistle or a shout, but with an unrolled list. On the wall of a narrow corridor, a long line of diodes lights up. Shifts of wet hands, quiet hands, distant eyes. You stand at your column and see. Today you are assigned Garden 2, tying and tending the young fronds. It is not a garden in your sense. It is a row of shallow tanks beneath milky light, where food, plastic, rope, and patience all grow together. In Garden 2 they step barefoot, water up to the knees. At the entry hang short aprons of flexible film, rustling like fresh kelp leaves. The water is warmer than the air. Thin ripples run across its surface from the pump's steady pulse. Nets stretch across each tank, holding down bright green laminae. Every strip has a label sealed in plastic. Date, temperature, mood. Mood is no superstition. It is the word for how the currents beneath the dome behaved overnight. You are placed between two veterans. One woman wields a moon knife, a blunt-nosed sickle. Another catches the cut fronds and folds them into mesh trays. Your task is to tie the young, fragile, almost transparent fronds that need just 2 loops of soft cord around the bar, enough to hold when a pump stutters. The cord is wet, pliant, the knot firm but kind, easy to undo when harvest comes. The talk is minimal. This one lower, that one nearer the light. This one, let it breathe. Above the tanks run shelves of tiny fans, bubble traps. They collect stray air leaking from unseen seams and return it to the water so the pipes do not chatter and the fingerlings in the next section do not panic. From beyond a divider comes a rhythmic tap-tap, someone checking a flow. If the sound dulls, The film is thickening and the tank will need attention. Cleaning is done not with brushes but with streams. In the corner waits a tool like a short lance with a soft tip. It sends out a veil of briny spray. That spray shaves slime without tearing the tender surface of the frond. They show you how to hold the lance so the hand will not tire, how to angle it so the water skims rather than gouges. You try. The veil slides across, the film lifts away, and beneath it the frond gleams like polished bone. In the neighboring chamber work is quieter still, the quiet hands. Here they check the hidden skeleton of the city, bolts on internal frames, clasps on trays, lamp hooks. Tools come later, first fingers. Flesh knows earlier than senses when a metal part has grown proud. They move slowly, leaving behind a faint smear of kelp oil on the bolt heads, not because they squeaked, but so they never will. Farther on are the distant eyes, not explorers outside, but listeners. Hydrophones draw sound maps of patience, the wide size of currents, the clicks of shrimp, a single round note from a whale far off. Operators hold wooden rulers with white ticks, sliding them across paper where the sound stumbles. Later, those marks will guide someone to nudge a side vent or shift a lamp, so plants and fish breathe easier. Others do go outside. In the airlock it smells of rubber and iodine. Along the wall hang carabiner rings, below them crates of weights for back and waist. Weight is not muscle here, it is language. Without the right weight, the water decides your fate. Every tool hangs on a cord, every blade blunted, every hook latched. Nothing must drift away, nothing must tear. One worker checks another, not with trust but with inventory. Belt, paddle, lamp, line, knife, valve. The airlock exhales, swallowing their silence, and the sea receives them at the exact measure agreed. Beyond is green haze, faint with city light. Rope trails stretch out, marked with knots at regular spans, each knot a clock, each knot a reassurance. They go to fish cages. Weighted corners keep the net from billowing like a sail. Palms stroke mesh as if stroking fur. They do not rip, they remove loops. A crab caught in the weave is bundled gently in cloth, carried down current, and released where it belongs. Farther still is the fiber farm. Slender threads drift on charged lines, growing and braiding themselves. Workers do not cut, they draw it out like warm glass. It slips meekly into bags, then goes to the rope hole, where on a long table 2 people walk toward each other, twisting the fibers into strands, then strands into cord, then cord into rope as thick as a wrist. They speak of soup, of weather, of who gets the warm vent today. The talk is steady, because steadiness is what keeps the rope honest. When the rope is finished, it is given a name, and when it grows old, it becomes mats for thresholds, so the home remembers what once held it safe. On the outer skin, others hang in harnesses rolling transparent gel over scars, where rock once scraped the dome. The gel sets under yellow lamps glowing like embers. The workers carry a pouch of small tools, a stick to pry a corner, a cloth to chase out an air bubble, a pinch of sand to clean gloves without scratching. Inside, other trades carry their rhythm. In the fermenting room stand barrels, some with vegetables from dry gardens, some with fish flakes, The lids wear living skins, films that shine smooth if all is well, jagged if heat has fled. Workers feed warm stones beneath them. In the manometry chamber, pressure is watched not only by dials but by glass ampules, each with a single droplet that slides if a section slackens. The dials may be exact, but the drop is a living eye. There is the fry house too, where fingerlings, dark commas, graze invisible clouds made in the crumb room. Bread dust, shredded greens, a drop of brine. No ruler counts them, only eyes. A shadow thicker than yesterday, someone writes. That is enough. Return from outside is greeted not with cheers but with silence. The airlock drips like heavy bread. Divers unclip weights, rub their palms, restoring dry grip. They are given thin sheets of fermented kelp, tart and sweet. Held between teeth and lip, they last longer. One shares half with you. It is not friendship. It is rhythm. Afternoon brings rope walks, spindles humming like breath. Elsewhere is the light hall where lamps are tuned to the moon. Circles drawn on a board mark the phases. Operators adjust the spectrum, sliding away blue, adding green. The fish respond as if the sky itself remembered. In the pipe ward, lime crust is scraped from conduits with wooden paddles that whisper rather than squeal. Each pipe has its song, a tapping pattern. Talk, 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 talk. A wrong note means time to act. Pilots sit in the mini-station, guiding little craft along the dome's shell. Their joysticks have short throws to save wrists. Their notes are clipped to hulls with kelp straps. They write not reports but small words. The lamp sweated, the corridor rasped. From such words, tomorrow is made safer. Evening leans in, and in the plastics room, algae paste is drawn into films, laid on wooden molds, tomorrow's lids, gaskets, straps. It smells sweet, faintly burnt like caramel. In the breathing house, anaerobic vats murmur. They eat what the city no longer wants and exhale what it needs. Thin glass eyes on their pipes quiver with bubbles, watched by attendants wearing white bands across the chest, the mark of those on breath duty. They speak in whispers, not from superstition, but to hear the house breathe. By nightfall, the board of the day shows a straight line. Garden two sealed, ropes named and nested, scars gelled, moon set right, drops aligned. And here lies the third truth, as soft as gel on glass. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you think work is a list of tasks. Here, work is the house's breathing, to tie a young frond where it can grow, to shave slime without insult, to coax a bolt before it sulks, to shift the light until fish believe in a moon, to twist fiber into a rope with a name. No noise, no heroics. Only hands, water, and rhythm. What keeps both glass and heart steady in their shared silence? Midday is announced not by a bell, but by a hollow reed that pulses once through the ducts. One soft breath that means household hours. The city loosens its shoulders. Work crews rotate. Doors that face workshops fold to half, while the doors that face home fold wide. You are steered gently toward the domestic spine where the day mends itself. The laundry alcove is a bright, warm throat in the wall. Tanks carry brine held just below skin temperature. The surface trembles with a fine, even quiver that belongs to tiny paddles turning under grates. No soapsuds here. Enzyme sachets, grown in jars the size of a fist, are scored and swished until the liquid goes from clear to pale tea. Cloth is pressed against slatted boards, not rubbed. Salt loosens salt better than scrubbing does. Ringers are not rollers, but woven loops you twist with both hands. They squeeze without wrinkling, leaving the cloth almost dry. Each family has a strip of colored filament, mint, ochre, ink blue, clipped to hems as the pieces move along suspended lines. A woman palms a flat heat stone from a pocket and smooths a collar while the fabric is still warm. Her other hand pinches a little vial, vinegar from the ferment hall, and dabs a seam so it will remember to lie down after it dries. Next door, the menders rule a narrow room where air smells faintly of hot metal and sea herbs. Patterns are held to the table by shell weights, their bottoms roughened so they grip without biting. Thread is spun from yesterday's fiber farm yield and rests on spools the color of driftwood. The best spools sing a little when you pull. Needles are blunted just enough to know when they have gone astray. Patches come three ways: soft knit for elbows, slick scale patches for cuff edges that flirt with wet, and transparent seals for places that must not fray again. Dyes sit in lidded cups, browns from microbial inks, moss green from a friendly algae, a stubborn black coaxed from charred kelp. A tailor stamps a family mark, 2 precise dots, into a hem with a heated ring. The ring leaves no color, only a memory in the weave. Over her head hangs a strip of safety cloth with 3 stitched words. The only thing anyone here quotes: "Fix it early." In a side corridor, a cluster of children is released into the bubble lane. Nets are strung inside a long, high arch where a row of nozzles coughs out clear spheres the size of grapes and apples and small moons. The game is not to pop but to herd. Palms shape wind. Elbows and shoulders learn to speak to currents without shouting. A boy learned that the quickest path is not the straight line, but a soft curve around another child's wake. A girl shows you how to stack 2 bubbles and make the top one ride the bottom like a pale lantern. "Just breathe on the underside," she says, and it works because breath is a tool here. When the lane is done, they collect the damp with giant squeegees and hang the nets along the rail. Quiet returns exactly as it left, by degrees. The clinic keeps its door unremarkable on purpose. Inside, cool drawers hold sachets of salt gel cut into thumb-sized lozenges that melt slow under the tongue. No white coats, aprons will do. Hydration is counted not by scolding, but by a little prism. Your drop of saliva draws a line that the attendant reads with the mild interest of someone following weather. A spray bottle with a brown label, kelp iodine, sits ready for scrapes, and ceramic clippers wait to tidy nails softened by brine. The medic watches wrists rather than eyes. Wrists tell the truth sooner. If you leave with a strip of woven tape along a finger, no one asks why. They see the tape and adjust your evening chore without mentioning it. The market hour begins as a table pushed out into the concourse and becomes, by addition, a street. No coins. Favors and slips. On one end, coils of sea thread, a jar of pickled shore leaf, 3 packets of starter for a hesitant ferment. On the other, a pair of lamp caps cut from yesterday's algae film, a handful of bone combs polished smooth, a set of hooks carved from salvaged drift, blunt and kind. The exchange is neat. A woman trades 2 afternoons of reading to the hydrophone watchers for a spool the color of rust. A young diver offers to recalibrate a neighbor's personal heater in return for a spoon of spice salt, dried sea fennel crushed with pepper moss. On the wall behind the table, a slate lists the trades that do not fit on wood. Carry warm stones to B2, 3 nights. Watch the fry house during the lull, 1 hour. Sing to the little ones for the last light, 2 songs. The chalk strokes get smudged and rewritten. The city's ledger breathes like anything living. Farther along, a small room wears the name Archive in letters cut from old cable ties. Paper survives here by being laminated between algae films. Books look like wafers of green glass, and they read back to front with soft crinkles. Shelves hold objects that talk without sound. A wrench with its teeth smoothed to harmlessness. The first quiet route cards drawn by a class 15 years ago. A cracked panel square that everyone touches reverently and no one glorifies. An elder sits on a low stool and whittles a piece of driftwood, letting a story find its shape by carving away what it is not. Children sit knee to knee, palms open on their thighs. The tale is not about monsters. It is about a hinge that learned to sing wrong, and the neighbor who heard it through the dish in her hand, and the day the city discovered that attention and love can be the same word if you say it slowly enough. Supper broth is someone else's chore today. Your side of the household does pickling and sweet. In a narrow galley, glass jars wait with measured brine lines. Hands drop in slivers of sea pear, a firm, pale stalk that remembers sugar, then a coin of ginger root grown in the dry trays. A child counts breaths between lid twists, so each seal matches the next. On the back burner, a small pot lets down a caramel from fermented syrup, just enough to lacquer a tray of seed crisps for tomorrow's pockets. A cook flicks the pot with a wooden stick and listens for the right pitch. When it sings tinny, it's too hot. When it thuds, it's asleep. Somewhere between is enough. Bathing is quiet work. The soak room is not a pool, but a set of oval tubs with headrests carved from old resin. Brine is warmed and lidded to keep heat shy and near. A timer turns a notch, and a notch means change places. Fresh water comes last, a dipper per person, poured over a cloth and passed across the shoulders like a kind sentence. Hair is combed with rib bone teeth. Salt rises in pale flowers and is brushed away, leaving scalp happy and practical. Children lean over a shallow basin where a team of harmless, cleaner snails patrols a slate. The snails do their jobs with such method that the children copy their pace without noticing. The weave bench hums like a sleeping creature. 2 people face each other with a shuttle between them, throwing and catching in a tempo you could walk to. This is where straps are born. Not ropes, not thread, but the things that keep a bundle honest and a child near. The edge of each strap is curled inward as it comes off the loom, taught to roll by itself so it won't cut skin. Tags are tied at specific distances, not for beauty but for memory. 3 finger widths, a palm, an elbow length, measures every hand agrees on. At the end, the strap receives a little coral-colored bead that slides under a knot. One tug, and the knot remembers how to let go. No one wastes time on a knot that will keep you hostage. While straps grow and jars click, a teacher moves through the concourse with a set of card decks that call themselves games. They are not competitions. They are rituals for learning a city's touch. One deck shows silhouettes of tools against wrong backgrounds. Children shout the proper pairings and then are asked to justify each match without using names, only by describing how the object feels. Gritty smooth, warm blunt, quiet elastic. Another deck is a map of small disasters. This vent sighs too fast. This line hums with a new pitch. This panel sweats a ring. The winner is the child who makes the fewest movements while solving the most problems. There is also hair to braid, and a skirt to lengthen by 2 thumbs' breadths, and a porch mat to coil from the last faithful rope retired today from the outer catwalk. Its fibers still smell of sun through water. A grandmother's hands feed the coil, stitch by stitch, telling a story with her wrists about the time the warm current came early and the lamps persuaded the fish it was not yet the month to lay. Around her, people nod without comment. They were there, or their parents were, or they have seen the note in the archive, 3 lines and a date. Afternoon thins. The reed in the ducts breathes again. 1 pulse, then a second, the friendly code for switch tasks, tidy edges. Laundry lines are half empty, cloth growing crisp where light filters through the dome. The menders shake out their mats, sweep tiny crescents of thread into a jar marked for fry feed. The bubble lane nets are folded and hooked out of reach. The market slate gets wiped down to its bones. A new hand writes mint cuttings tomorrow after second light. As you pass the clinic, the attendant sits with a tray of fresh breathers, little hooded collars with their filters changed. He holds one up, checks the seam with his lips instead of his fingers, and smiles because seams tell the truth to mouths in a way fingers sometimes miss. At the archive, someone slides a finished driftwood carving onto a shelf and tucks beneath it a card no bigger than a nail. A hinge, a dish, a neighbor's ear. That is all the story needs to survive. Here is the 4th truth, laid down like a stitch you can unpick later if you must. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you think community is a festival. Here, it is the housekeeping of one another. Laundry smoothed, salt red, jars sealed, straps taught to let go, stories carved thin enough to pass from hand to hand without tearing. The sea presses. The home answers by putting everything in its place and everyone in each other's care. Evening will come, and with it songs and broth, but it will sit on the solid chair this hour built, quietly, one practical grace at a time. Warning here does not arrive with sirens. It begins as a vowel in the bones. Pumps lengthen their note by a breath. Hydrophones draw a new line on the operator's paper, and the reed in the ducts exhales twice, then once, then twice again. Everyone knows that rhythm. Hold fast. Doors that were wide for household hours ease to their quarter stops. The market table folds itself back into the wall. Chalk is blown from the slate with a careful puff, as if not to offend the numbers. A child looks up at the ceiling and closes her hand around the bead on her strap without being told. Pressure is a polite tyrant. When it changes, it asks for stillness first. The city obliges. Footfalls soften. Conversations take one step down in volume and another in speed. Vent louver tilt to their quiet position. The warm channel pauses mid-syllable. Lamps trim their blue and lean toward green to calm the fish. In the ferment room, a hand slides 2 extra stones under a barrel whose skin has gone a shade too dull. Its shine steadies, and the hand moves on. On the concourse wall, the sector map, hairline traces of the dome's skin, gains a single breathing amber at the far west curve. No hurry. The mark is not an eye, it is a reminder. In the manometry chamber, the glass droplets inside their ampules cling a fraction longer to the neck before they fall. An attendant makes a pencil point on a strip of tape and writes +2 heartbeats. That is all the record needs to be useful tomorrow. Some dangers arrive as waves with names, internal, standing, long-period pulses sent by things above you will never see. This one is only an opinion the water has decided to hold for a while. Ballast bladders take on a fistful of weight, tethers pay out a thumb. Counterflow pumps loosen, reverse, and then snug again, an old cater, wrist remembering. The outer skin's tenders, already in harness from routine, slide their pouches closer and drift to their watch points. They speak to each other only with hands. Good there. Watch there. Breathe small. At the clinic, a tray of fresh breathers appears like a thought finished. The attendant touches seams with his lips, sets each collar down with its filter mouth inward. The rule is simple. If a mouth needs it, it is within reach of a mouth. Across the way, the archive closes its wafer books and lays a thin cloth over the driftwood carving finished an hour ago. The cloth is not protection. It is a gesture that says, later we will pick up this sentence exactly here. You are steered by the city's posture more than by any command. Along the ribs, a line of dots the size of lentils blooms amber and then stays. That is the inner track for this mood of water. Palms find the ribs' shallow scallops, handholds meant to be used, not admired. Cups that are out have their lids turned the quarter that locks the hinge. Lids on pots get their cloth bands tightened and tied in the knot that yields if pulled the right way but never by accident. The games the teacher runs in ordinary hours, tools on wrong backgrounds, vents sighing too fast, have the decency to be useful. A girl who won yesterday's small disasters deck silently closes an unnecessary hatch a man nearly walked through, and the man nods at the correctness of being corrected. The first push arrives. It is not a jolt, but a patient whole-room persuasion. The dome answers by taking the weight into its big bones. The floor plates murmur a round note you feel in the teeth rather than hear. Somewhere far down, a panel makes a sound like a fingernail on thick glass, and 3 people in 3 different rooms lean with the same angle of ear and decide together it is the right sound. The reed breathes once. Good. One trouble does show its face, and it is small, which is the only way trouble is allowed to begin here. On a viewing rib along the west corridor, a bloom the size of a fingernail appears. Salt not from the room but from the seam, a salt flower. It is as delicate as frost and as unmistakable. The person nearest does not shout. They do not call names. They set down their lidded cup, place 2 fingers on the rib, you are seen, and whistle the corridor whistle in one short high syllable. The sound does not fight the pumps, it threads them. The right 2 arrive with kits already open. The first warms the place with a pocket stone, circling heat into the glass with her palm until the salt flower weeps the smallest tear. The second wipes the tear with cloth, lays down a ring of salt gel, thumb thick, sky clear, and smooths it with a wooden stick. The gel knows where to find the wobble and sits there like a decision. A strip of transparent seal follows, not forever. No fix here is allowed to be forgotten, but for the hour. The map's amber does not multiply. The reed does not stir. Work flows around the kneeling pair and knits behind them. Children go to the inner benches by prearranged lots. One carries a basket of quiet tasks, a coil of straps to sort by finger widths, a deck that asks them to match sounds, tap, hum, hiss, to the names of places without writing those names. A boy misnames a hiss and is asked calmly to touch, with both palms, the next 2 grills and listen again. He changes his mind out loud in a different tone. This, too, is work the city recognizes. Elders do not tell long stories in a holdfast. They tell short ones that fit between breaths. The hinge that learned to sing wrong and a neighbor who heard it through the dish. The year the moon lamps convinced the fish to wait despite the warm current. The day a wrist spoke before a mouth and a bolt stayed polite. These are not for comfort. They are for posture. The body remembers stories with its joints. Beyond the dome, the water tries another sentence. The second push is thinner, faster, the kind that teases loose things into giving themselves away. In the rope hall, hands pause mid-throw and catch, not to freeze but to let their own wake pass. On the light board, a finger slides a 0.5% greener. Fish do not skitter. The fry house keeps its shadow. In the pipe ward, a paddle's tap changes from talk-talk to talk-talk-talk. A wooden handle turns the width of a coin. The sound returns to its manners. You notice how many objects in this city have a way to be made still. Bowls with magnets, straps with beads, lids with cloth bands, doors with quarter-stops, stones that hold heat as if it were a sleeping child. A woman at the mender's bench does not set down her needle. She tucks the thread between 2 fingers and waits until the floor's round note lowers, then takes 1 more stitch and ties it. Across from her, someone rolls vinegar between thumb and forefinger and dabs the corner of a garment. Salt has a craft for sneaking back while you are not looking. Vinegar is the reply learned centuries ago and never unlearned. The operators in distant eyes look less at waves on their screens than at the spaces between. A pencil taps twice at the edge of one graph. A ruler slides. A lamp icon is ticked a hair to starboard and marked with a dot. Decisions here are not chosen for their glamour but for their predictability. Glamour breaks seals. If fear is in the room, it has learned to dress as attention. You feel it in the many small refusals to make noise. A spoon held a breath longer over a bowl to shed a drop. A laugh that turns into a grin before it leaves the mouth. A step that lands on a rib rather than between ribs. No one forbids these things. No list is posted. Practice alone teaches them. And practice is a teacher everyone listens to because practice handled yesterday and plans to handle tomorrow. The water releases its opinion the way a hand lets go of a rail, not suddenly. The reed breathes a single long note, the tone that means put back the extra. Ballast yields its fistful, tethers take back their thumb. The amber on the map fades to the pale of a story not needed today. In the manometry chamber, a droplet falls exactly on the mark that pleases the attendant enough to put down the pencil. Someone in the archive lifts the cloth and reads 3 lines of yesterday's wafer book before putting it back and straightening the driftwood carving until it sits as if it were always meant to belong where it does. After, there is no celebration. There is the little work that must always be done after a holdfast. The saltflower seal gets its time written small with grease pencil and a note. Check at second light. Gel good for 16 hours. The light hole returns the moon to its practice phase. The fry house receives a new card. Lull steady, count by shade. In the clinic, the breathers are returned, seams licked once more and hung mouth out to say ready. The market slate, wiped for the wave, finds new chalk. 3 offerings appear. Carry warm stones to C1, 2 nights. Swap out lime paddles, left rack. Tell the hinge story at last light. Here is the 5th truth. Set down without italics or drum. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you mistake danger for spectacle. Here it is arithmetic and choreography, a reed's code, a palm on a rib, a bead slid under a knot, a gel laid the thickness of a thumb, a lamp tuned 0.5%, a droplet that falls where it should. The sea will always have opinions. The home will always answer by staying teachable. Between those stances, people go on tying, mending, tasting, listening, alive not because alarms are loud, but because attention is. Evening does not fall here, it is poured. Lamps along the ceiling tilt through a careful gradient, from salt amber to dusk green, until the outside water returns as a mirror, not a window. Fish become silhouettes, chalk strokes on green slate. Inside, the city draws itself in. Curtains half dropped along the viewing ribs to keep interior light from confusing the night schools. Walkways trimmed to a lower glow that makes metal kind and faces calm. The galley turns purposeful. Heat is borrowed, not burned. Steam rises from narrow coils that ride the waistline, and baskets nest above them in tidy towers. A cook taps a basket with a knuckle. The sound tells her the dumplings have gone from stubborn to ready. They're stuffed with minced root from the dry trays, flecked with fish flake and shore leaf zest. On a flat pan, thin sea cabbage sheets blister and soften before being rolled around a spoonful of warm grain paste, microbial, nutty, the color of wet sand. A small pot on the rear rail thickens agar into a soft set, to be cut later into squares and painted with a ribbon of fermented syrup. Spice salt, sea fennel crushed with pepper moss, waits in a wooden cup. Each pinch is a decision, not a reflex. Tables unlock from the wall on jointed legs and plant their magnetic feet. Cloths are laid, not white, but woven from drift-colored thread and anchored at the corners with shell weights. Bowls arrive with lids. Lids hold heat, and heat is half the meal. Portions are counted by the day's labor but plated as kindness. A diver's bowl a thumb higher, a rope walker's with an extra roll. Children carry a tray of wedge-cut kelp bread and move along the line with the seriousness of messengers. One pauses to slip a crust onto an elder's mat without ceremony, only the briefest touch of fingers on the mat's edge to mean, "I see you." Before anyone eats, there is a small work that belongs only to this hour. A shallow dish of clear brine is passed down the table. Each person drops in 3 grains of salt glass shaved from an old jar. What was used, what was spared, what is owed. The dish is set by the galley door where an apprentice will read it with the amused gravity of someone learning to keep books. The reading is simple. The dish must be neither empty nor heaped, and if it is either, tomorrow's steam schedule is adjusted. The meal itself is quiet but not hushed. Voices ride the edge of steam, telling the sort of news that belongs to hands. The rope named this afternoon gets its name rehearsed aloud until everyone can say it. Mooring Finch, and the 3 places it will live are named with it, because ropes like to know where they belong. Someone report that the saltflower seal took without complaint. Someone else mentions a lamp that ran too warm for half a watch and is already wearing a new cap. A child is asked to recite the order of a strap knot backward. She does, and an aunt says, "Good. Now your hands know the knot even when your head is tired." Music comes out of a drawer, literally. Water drums, small hoops skinned with fish membrane, are tuned with a lick of brine and a thumb pressed at the rim. A shell chime hangs from a driftwood dowel, its pieces cut blunt so they clack instead of ring. There is a low flute made from a conduit offcut. Its sound is a line drawn with a wet brush. No one performs. People add sound the way cooks add salt until the broth sits up straighter. Feet do not stamp. They shift and breathe. A young man shows a current step, a dance that teaches ankles to read push and pull. The trick is to move the knee and leave the bowl on your lap untroubled. Children practice with empty bowls and learn faster than they know. In a side bay, someone sets out the stone cradle, a rack above a vent where heat stones do their slow work of remembering warmth. Names are clipped to them with thread. When they are ready, they are carried away in pairs, one for a lap, one for a bed. This is not charity, it is logistics with a good manner. At the far table, 2 teenagers polish the faces of hand lamps and trim algae wicks that will glow in the dim paths where adults do not wish to flood light at night. They work with the exasperated joy of people trusted with a thing that matters. The archive sends its share to the evening. A deck of small disasters is opened again, but now as a game for grown hands. A card is turned. This panel sweats a ring, and the person whose work today smells most of iodine answers with a gesture rather than a lecture. The cloth band tightened and tied, the seam checked with a lip, the timing of a follow-up scratched on a thumb with a bit of soot. Another card shows vent whispers too fast. The player taps the pad of a finger against the table in a rhythm everyone can feel. Hush, hush, hush. And another hand turns an imaginary flap by a nail width. Laughter follows, the easy kind that lands softly and stays. Outside, the water declares a far traveler. A single round note passes by with the unhurried confidence of a giant that has no interest in you. Heads tilt. No one says whale. Naming would make it yours, and it is not. The light hall trims the blue a fraction more, and the silhouettes outside become slower, thicker. A few fish nose the glass, tasting their own reflections, then turn to the deeper green. Curtains along the ribs are let down the last finger's breadth. The city does not hide from the sea, it keeps the sea from being distracted by people. There is mending particular to evening and nowhere else. Tongues of felt are slid under the feet of chairs so they will not complain when bodies shift. A ladle's handle is wrapped with a new strip where salt had started to earn its living inside the grain. A frayed cuff is given a line of scale patches across the edge, each one overlapped like a roof tile, so water, if it goes looking, finds only no. A boy is taught the habit of turning a lid, the quarter that locks it before he sets a bowl on the rail. He does it 3 times in a row until his hand does it without consulting him, and only then is he praised. Dessert is a tray set near, not in, the center. Agar squares painted with syrup and a scatter of seed crisps that the morning's caramel was meant for. People take them slowly. Sweetness has a different speed here. A woman dips a crisp in brine and eats it with the pleased face of someone who understands that salt is not an enemy if you ask it correctly. The reed in the ducks gives its evening breath, the code that means tidy edges, set watches. The galley cloths are rolled while still warm so they will dry without remembering creases. Stone cradles are emptied, names are swapped to cool clips. Lamps along the concourse dim to their night run. 2 seats are drawn up by the oxy panel with the chair that everyone agrees is tolerably uncomfortable. The first watcher lays a hand flat on the face of the machine not to feel warmth. It should not be warm, but to make sure her skin knows the hum before the room goes fully blue. The second tallies minutes on a cord with 4 knots. When the 4th knot passes, they trade without waking anyone who has learned to sleep through good news. Here is the 6th truth, set down like a bowl with both hands. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you think evening is what is left after work. Here, it is a craft of unwinding, light lowered to spare fish their confusion, steam spent with the precision of a ledger, knots taught to release, stones warmed and paired with names, music added until the room sits right. Joy is not noise. It is competence shared quietly. On that, the night will rest, and on that morning will have something firm to stand on. Night here is drawn with a soft instrument. Lamps inhale, then thin to a blue that is more suggestion than light. Along the ribs, guide strips dim from pearl to a hush that leaves the metal forgiving to toes and hands. Outside, the water stops being a window and becomes a sky. Slow chalk lines of plankton drift and blink. A comb jelly crosses like a lantern with a secret. Somewhere deeper, A veil of tiny fish folds and unfolds as if the sea were practicing breathing without you. The city changes its posture the way a sleeper turns a pillow. Curtains are pulled down the last finger's breadth to dull reflections. The warm air that shared the laundry's throat is pinched to a thread and threaded through sleeping bays. Dew lines, thin cords run under the ceiling, begin to collect their bright beads. When a bead grows heavy enough, it crawls to a knot and falls into a waiting lip of glass with a sound too small for anyone but night to hear. In the corridors, feet prefer the ribs, not the spaces between. Nothing squeaks. Everything is taught the art of not interrupting. Beds here are shallow boats. The mats remember the shapes of backs and hips and offer them again with shy accuracy. Heat stones, warmed and named, slide into pockets along the edge and take up their watch along kneecaps and calves. Ankle bands grow modest, their copper goes to ember, then to dark. Breathing collars, the little hooded rings with fresh filters, are nested mouth out on pegs within reach of a half-asleep hand. Lids on cups are quarter-turned and set where a thumb can find the seam without thinking. The thin strip above each door shows a night face, not numbers, but 3 dots that pulse together whenever the reed in the ducts takes a long, even breath. The watch is 2 people and a chair that refuses to let you grow too comfortable. The first watcher rests her palm flat against the oxy panel and counts the machine's pulse until her own heart falls in step. Then she removes her hand so the panel will not learn to depend on her. Beside her is a tray with a small abacus ring, 5 sliding beads the size of peas. Every 15 minutes she pushes one with the nail of her little finger so the motion will not wake the wrist. The second watcher takes the low route, walking the inner track by the ribs, not to look but to listen where wood and metal meet. Any new tremor makes a different letter under the fingertips. When they cross paths, they trade a word no louder than breath. Even, cool, polite, and continue. The clinic keeps its lamp at the level called kind. Someone sleeps there by choice every night to make sure sick and worry never arrive to a room alone. A drawer slides open, later shut, and a strip of woven tape appears on a bedside table with one end folded up like a little ear so a groggy hand can peel it easily. At the far end of the concourse, a hand scrubbed the day's iodine from the ladle's handles until the wood felt like wood again. No one sees that work, no one needs to. The handles will be honest in the morning. Fish change shifts too. The light hall nudges the lamp's one mark toward true night. The blue that was already blue lets go the last of its green. Out beyond the glass, larger shapes claim their lanes with the authority of creatures who do not consider you a subject of interest. A squid flares, then remembers that brightness is a liability and dims. Close to the dome, a few small jaws test their reflections and, finding glass, move on to simpler puzzles. The city obliges by hiding itself. A curtain's hem is lowered another nail width, and a lamp over a bench slips under a shade. There are songs for this hour, but they are not performed so much as allowed. A hand drum is left on a mat. Someone passing places a palm to it and gives the room one slow heartbeat. The membrane answers and goes quiet again. A child hums 2 notes into her sleeve because it's where her fear lives when she lies down. An elder, seeing the hum, reaches past it to tap the frame of the child's bed twice, here, and the sleeve loses interest. The archive does not sleep. It turns to its night habits, wafer books laid flat under low lamps, a line copied, just one, onto a slip that will go to the school in the morning. A hinge sings wrong when tired. Beside the books sits a small box of offcuts, bits of strap, a square of algae film, a smooth bolt. It is the borrow drawer. Night walkers on their rounds take a piece and keep it in the pocket to test in passing. The bolt head under a thumb, the strap edge against the wrist, the film's tack against a lip. The drawer teaches without opening its mouth. Dreams in this place are practical. Even asleep, hands rehearse. Fingers twitch out a knot and let it go again. A thumb seeks and finds the quarter turn on an imaginary lid. A wrist makes a small correcting circle and the shoulders stop bracing. Bodies learn what the city expects of them by doing it without witnesses. A heat stone's weight across a shin tells the marrow stay here, and the marrow listens. If you wake, it is often to the sound of something finishing correctly, a droplet landing in its glass, a pump easing into its quieter register, a curtain settling flatter as the night current chooses modesty. Outside, there is a meteor shower that has nothing to do with rock and fire. Comb jellies, 3 and 4, drift with their ciliary rainbows rippling as if they carried news from hotter waters. The dome does not react. It's not an audience, it's a neighbor. Farther out, a single long round sound moves through the water like a bell lowered on a rope, fading in a way that convinces even the most curious child to stay in bed. No one says the word for the animal that made it. Names make ownership, and the city practices not owning what it must live beside. Midnight is a bookkeeping idea more than a clock here. The reed gives its long breath, and the 3 dots on the door strips pulse in a pattern that says, "Half the night is yours. Give it back kindly." The first watcher slides her last bead and writes a single letter on a slate, O, which means everything behaved. The second turns her route inward, checks the dew lines where beads have fallen and lenses are half full. She tips a lens into a jar, caps it, marks it with a white slash. The jar will go to the garden in the morning because nothing here sits in a story alone. There is a moment toward the deep end of night when the city's hum and the sea's hush overlap so neatly that it feels as if both have agreed on a single chord. That is when the sleepers sink the farthest and the watchers feel most useless and most necessary at once. In a side bay, a grandmother with a stubborn knee rolls a heat stone in its cloth until it finds the one spot that turns ache into later. She does this without light. She could do it with her eyes closed, and does. Near the west corridor, a new worker wakes, certain he heard the wrong sound, and lies listening until he recognizes it. Only the tiny rain when a dew bead finds the glass lip, and sleeps again, a better citizen for the hearing. Near dawn, not yet morning, the lamps bend imperceptibly toward Pearl. The light hall makes a mark on its phase board with the slow pride of someone who kept a promise most people would not notice. The archive closes its borrow drawer. 2 offcuts are missing and will return as tired stories in pockets at breakfast. The watch trades places, new palms on the oxy panel, new ears to the ribs. The dew lines give up their last beads. The abacus ring returns to 5 on one side. And here is the 7th truth, set down with the softness the night teaches. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you think sleep is absence. Here it is half the labor, quiet vigilance, bodies practicing what daylight will ask, machines trusted but not left alone, fear braided into custom until it only tugs when it must. The sea presses even when it dreams. The home breathes back even when it sleeps. Between those two, the dark becomes gentle enough to hold, and morning, when it pours, will find hands already knowing what to do. Dawn here does not break, it lifts like a lid. The lamps lean away from blue toward pearl, and the outer water gives back color in cautious degrees. First the green of bottle glass, then a smoke of silver where plankton fold themselves into day. On the ribs, the guide strips wake one by one, not in a line but in a slow scatter, the way fish blink. Night's last beadlets slide along the dew cords and drop, patient as punctuation, into their waiting lips of glass. A watcher rubs the sleep from her palms, presses them flat to the oxy panel once, greeting, not checking, and writes a single letter on the slate that means everything behaved. The city uncurls. Curtains are lifted the finger's breadth that keeps reflections from bossing the fish. The warm thread that stitched through sleeping bays fattens to a ribbon and drifts toward kitchens. Footfalls reclaim the middle of the walk instead of the rib. The polite furniture sighs back into places where elbows expect it. Someone takes the jar of night water, those careful, collected drops, and tips it into the low garden's trough, where the moss darkens like cloth under a thumb and looks happier than moss ever looks on land. A small procession goes by without anyone calling it a procession. Last watch hands carrying what they borrowed from the archives drawer, the square of algae film, the worn bolt, a piece of strap, returning each with the little notes night writes on skin. A child meets them with the morning kettle's steam caught in her sleeve. She funnels it into the drawer as if it had weight and whispers a thank you because no one has ever told her not to. The slip copied in the small hours. A hinge sings wrong when tired is tucked into the school's basket under a chalk stub and a length of mint thread. It will become today's single sentence that everyone reads 2 times aloud and once with their hands. On the concourse, the sector map holds steady, the west curve unbothered, last night's amber a memory no one wastes breath on. The saltflower seal, thumb thick and sky clear, receives its check without fanfare. A touch of lip to seam, a glance at the tiny scroll that says, "See me at second light." The scroll is obedient. The seam is quiet. A pencil line adds good. Elsewhere, things that were beginnings are allowed to become middles. The rope named yesterday, mooring finch, leaves the bench for the store that smells of dry fiber and old weather. The log gets a neat cross where its name sits, and beside it a small circle that means it will go to work by the high tide after next. In the light hall, the moonboard sheds last night's green ring for a thin, new one drawn in graphite. The lamps accept the change like instruments that enjoy being tuned. The fry house posts a card that reads simply shade even, which is praise in a place that prefers nouns to adjectives. The kitchen does not repeat the evening's generosity, it rehearses the morning's thrift. Thin cups warm inside sleeves, not overheat. A lidded pan persuades a broth toward readiness without surrender. A child taps a spoon's rim against her palm to hear if it has remembered its good manners. It has, and she smiles without telling anyone why. The first steam of the day rises not like a cloud, but like a signature. Narrow, upright, sure. Household ledgers breathe. Heat stones that slept with names on them have their clips turned to cool and are stacked like loaves. A new row of blanks takes their place in the cradle to learn the day's warmth. The sand timer on the drying rack is flipped once to account for the wetness of dawn linen, and once to account for the way light changes cloth. At the clinic, a drawer shows a fresh mouth of woven tape. The top strip is folded like a small ear, a habit that says, "You will not wrestle me half awake." Outside, a shadow that was loud at night becomes anonymous in day. A shape passes that might have been a ray or a piece of yesterday's rumor, and the dome pays it the compliment of not naming it. Fish thin from silhouettes to ideas in motion. Along the skin, a smudge marks where a jelly brushed and moved on. Someone will clean it later with a cloth that has already learned not to argue. The market does not assemble. It reappears as if it had only exhaled. Not tables yet, slates. On one, a sketch of a broken latch and a promise to bring the hinge that fits it. Afternoon, second watch. On another, a list of songs suitable for last light in the fry house. 2 lines each, no choruses to tangle small lungs. The favors board acquires a line drawn with sleepy chalk. Carry dew jars to gardens, every hand, which is less an errand than a reminder of whose water does what. A grandmother tucks a coin of ginger into a child's pocket with the same motion she uses to press a panel flatter in wind. It is not medicine so much as memory of warmth. Someone else knots a red thread into the corner of a basket that will travel the high catwalks, not for luck, but so a glance can tell whether the basket is going where baskets should. 2 apprentices compare the backs of their hands and laugh at a stain that proves they both forgot to wear the same glove yesterday. Then each takes a cloth and removes the proof before the cloth remembers them. The reed in the ducts gives a breath that belongs only to morning, 2 shy notes and a long one, and the ankle bands answer by waking their copper to attend. Children turn their heads to watch the pulses because they still like to see sound behave. An elder, passing the manometry panel, pauses long enough to reverse 1 ampule and watch the droplet hesitate, then fall exactly on its mark. The droplet does not know it is a blessing, it does not need to. The elder knows it, and that suffices. Lessons begin with the luck of small tasks. A boy is given a new comb for the weave bench and told to listen for when the shuttle likes the space between threads better than the threads themselves. He nods like someone who has inherited a difficult pet. A girl is asked to stand by the vent and count to 30 without using numbers. She does it with breaths, and the teacher marks a silent star in the air above her shoulder. These are not games. They are the slow rehearsals a city uses to convince tomorrow to arrive in the right clothes. If you are looking for triumphs, you will be disappointed. The city prefers continuity. The day does not make a sound when it clicks into place. It simply shows you small evidence that it has. The way a seam sits, the way a strap's bead slides under a knot and waits where it should, the way a shelf holds tools with their mouths inward so the room is kinder than the objects in it. You think of routine as something thin. Here it is, thick enough to stand on. By mid-morning's first edge, the dew jars emptied into the low gardens come back clean and are hung mouth down in their row. A watch cap with the white band is folded into its square and slid into the clinic drawer. The archive's night slip has turned into chalk under a child's hand. A hinge sings wrong when tired, grows into an arrow toward the workshop and a second arrow toward the ear. Someone claps once, approval without applause, and the line is kept. The sea, having pressed all night, does not apologize for doing so. It resumes its opinion about the dome with the calm of stone and tide. The home, which has been breathing back the whole time, continues. The trades that make sound return to sound, rope muttering against itself in the store like dry grass, a light shallow footnote from the ferment lids, the conversational hush of clean air finding new corners. You have learned enough to notice when those noises change. You have not learned enough to be useful if they do. Here is the eighth truth. Not italic, not carved, but present the way weight is present on a palm. You would not last a day in this underwater city because you imagine survival is a single act. Here it is, a braid of small obediences, light bent for fish, dew saved for moss, heat carried with names, stories copied to wrists, seams read with lips, danger answered with arithmetic and grace. The sea keeps its counsel. The home keeps its promises. Between them, people go on with their exact patient arts, pouring dawn, portioning warmth, teaching ankles and ears and hands to think. And as the lamps finally climb to day, and the outer water brightens into the color of a kept word, the city is already working on the next quiet miracle, making evening sturdy before it arrives, so night has somewhere certain to lie down,